They never tell you this part. Life doesn't wait until you're ready. It doesn't strike when you are armored. It waits until you are naked, fragile, already trembling, and then it breaks you open. The friend betrays you the week you finally learn to trust. The relationship collapses the moment you start believing in forever. The loss arrives exactly when you've said to yourself, "Now I am safe." It feels like cruelty. It feels like proof that the universe has abandoned you. But Jung saw something else. He saw precision. He wrote that the psyche has its own clock, its own merciless accuracy. Pain does not come at the wrong time. It comes at the only time. And that is the dangerous truth no one wants to hear. The very moment you cursed as unfair may have been the exact second your soul had been waiting for. We like to believe that accidents rule our suffering, that grief is random, betrayal is coincidence, heartbreak is bad luck. But the unconscious, Jung insisted, does not move in accidents. It moves with purpose. It chooses timing like a surgeon chooses the exact place to cut. Sharp, unforgiving, necessary. This is why your worst moment always arrives like an ambush, because if it came sooner, you would not yet be able to survive it. If it came later, you would already be too entangled to escape. Precision is not cruelty. Precision is care, a form of care so ruthless it feels like destruction. Think about the strangeness of it. The diagnosis comes not when you are carefree, but when you are finally starting to dream bigger. The breakup happens not when you're distant, but when you've just dared to believe in closeness again. The silence falls not when you are numb, but when you've just remembered how to feel. Every collapse feels like insult. But what if insult is initiation? What if what looked like an ending was the only doorway your deeper self could open? Carl Jung called this the psyche's purposiveness, its drive to wholeness, its obsession with timing. The unconscious waits for cracks in your identity. It waits until your ego is brittle, then delivers the blow, not because it wants to destroy you, but because it knows you can't build wings on an unbroken caterpillar. The shell must split. The old self must dissolve. We hate this. We fight it with explanations. Why now? Why me? Why like this? But explanation is a human demand, and the unconscious does not speak human language. It speaks in symbols, in synchronicities, in ruptures that feel like betrayal but are actually alignments. Synchronicity, Jung wrote, is the mysterious marriage of inner state and outer event, a dream that later arrives in waking life, a stranger's sentence that answers the question you never said out loud, a door that closes at the exact hour you were about to walk through it. These are not coincidences, they are coordinates, and your pain, as unbearable as it felt, was one of them. The wound itself was synchronistic. The heartbreak that split you open was not accidental. It was the only hour your soul could bear to be split. But here is where it feels impossible. The ego is not built for this. The ego is built to predict, to control, to avoid. Its job is survival. And divine timing violates survival. The nervous system interprets collapse as abandonment. The mind interprets it as unfairness. But the unconscious interprets it as readiness. Jung himself learned this through his confrontation with the unconscious, the years when visions, dreams, and despair overtook him. To the world he looked broken. To himself he feared madness. But looking back, he admitted it was timing. His psyche dissolved him, because he was finally ready to meet his depths. The alchemists had always known this. Transformation begins with dissolution. Base metal must melt in fire before gold appears. The ego is that base metal clinging to permanence, terrified of flames. But the self, Jung's term for the deeper essence, welcomes the fire. It knows that false forms must burn away. So the collapse doesn't come when you're strongest. It comes when you're weakest, because weakness is the opening. The self needs an opening, and it chooses the most fragile, the most inconvenient, the most unbearable moment. Have you noticed this in your own life? The way tears sometimes arrive before you even know what you're losing. The way your chest tightens hours before betrayal shows itself. The way you dream of water, fire, or broken glass, and days later, something in your waking life shatters. Your unconscious knew. Your body knew. The only part of you that didn't know was your ego. That is why pain feels like abandonment. But Jung argued it is the opposite. Pain is proof of guidance. Pain is the self's brutal way of loving you. Not the love that comforts, but the love that transforms. A love that values your wholeness more than your happiness. And yet look at how we are taught. Most philosophies soften this. Everything happens for a reason, they tell us. As if reason could explain why your child was born and died in the same season. As if reason could explain why your partner left the night you finally said, "I love you." Reason cannot contain mystery. Jung insisted the unconscious doesn't work in reason. It works in paradox. It works in archetype. It works in sacred timing. So let us say the harder truth. Suffering is not reasonable, but it is meaningful. Imagine if autumn argued with winter, if the trees begged for one more month of sunlight, if the leaves cried, "Not now, not yet." Ridiculous, isn't it? And yet this is exactly what we do when endings arrive. We negotiate with time, as if time could be negotiated, but no leaf resists its fall. No tide bargains with the moon. Only humans resist the seasons of their own becoming. And what happens when we resist? Suffering stretches, we prolong the agony. Every time you cling, pain multiplies. Every time you surrender, timing moves. Think about it. How many times did you stay in the job long after your soul had left it? How many times did you hold on to the relationship even as your dreams shrank? How many times did you beg for safety when safety was the very thing suffocating you? And when you finally let go, wasn't there clarity? Didn't life rush in with opportunities, encounters, miracles you couldn't have engineered yourself? The truth is merciless. The universe does not care about your deadlines. It cares about your readiness. And readiness rarely feels like readiness. It feels like grief, like collapse, like endings that look like failures. But in truth, they are beginnings disguised as loss. So hear this. Your breakdowns were not accidents. Your losses were not detours. Your heartbreaks were not meaningless. They were precision. They were alignment. They were thresholds into the self. And this is where our journey begins today. Because if you can bear this dangerous possibility that your suffering was orchestrated by a deeper intelligence, then nothing in your life will look the same again. Today, I will show you 5 profound signs that your pain was never random. Signs that suffering itself is a coded text your soul has been writing all along. Signs that what felt like abandonment was actually initiation. By the end, you will understand why Jung believed that painful timing is the architecture of individuation, why he saw despair as the moment the self finally had room to enter, and why your darkest hours may have been the doorway your soul was always waiting for. Stay with me, because once you see these 5 signs, you will never look at pain the same way again. 1. The wound as a doorway. Jung once wrote that the psyche does not wound randomly. Every rupture is surgical, timed, and pointed toward transformation. Pain is not chaos. It is choreography. The moment that split you apart did not arrive to punish you. It arrived to initiate you. Think of the woman who thought she had finally built stability, the home, the partner, the future she had dreamed of. Then in one season, everything collapsed, the lease broken, the partner gone, the plans turned to ash. To her ego, it was annihilation. But looking back, she admits, had the blow not arrived exactly then, she would still be trapped inside a life too small for her. The loss was the door, the wound was the opening. This is the paradox. The worst moments often carry the exact architecture of liberation. What appears as destruction is the blueprint of becoming. And here is the question, not for your mind, but for your memory. When you recall your own wound, the one that marked you, the one that still burns in your chest, do you see only the fracture, or can you glimpse the doorway it carved? 2. The body as an oracle. Before the mind understands, the body already knows. Your chest tightens hours before the words of betrayal are spoken. Your skin prickles with dread, the day the call about loss finally arrives. Your dreams leave you breathless weeks before change appears. Jung observed that the unconscious does not wait for logic, it whispers through sensation. He called this the wisdom of the body, a premonition that emerges when the conscious mind is still blind. Most people dismiss it, just nerves, just imagination. But ignoring these signals is like refusing to see smoke before the fire. Consider the man who woke at 3 a.m. with his heart racing, though his house was quiet. Hours later, a phone call shattered the silence. His brother had been taken to the hospital. The body announced the fracture long before language arrived. Your nervous system is not your enemy, it is your messenger. What feels like anxiety may be a prophecy. What feels like restlessness may be the signal that time is shifting beneath your feet. And so I ask you, not casually, but as an act of recognition, when has your body spoken before the world revealed its truth? And did you listen, or did you turn away? 3. Sacred disruption. We are taught to fear disorder, to cling to control. Yet Jung observed that the psyche often speaks through disruption, through the chaos that tears apart our neatly drawn maps. What you call disaster, the unconscious calls design. A woman once believed her entire worth depended on one role, her career. Every hour was scheduled, every success meticulously stacked like bricks in a fortress. Then came the collapse. Her company dissolved overnight, and with it, her carefully built identity. She wandered in shock, feeling stripped bare. But in the stillness that followed, something unexpected emerged. A passion she had silenced for years, painting. What looked like ruin became her resurrection. The chaos had not destroyed her, it had revealed her. Sacred disruption is never polite. It arrives like lightning, splitting the sky open without apology. But its violence is not against you, it is for you. It dismantles the illusions you mistook for safety, leaving only what was real enough to endure the storm. So I ask you, quietly but insistently, when life last tore down what you thought was unshakable, did you see only wreckage, or did you notice the raw shape of who you were becoming? The mirror of shadows. Jung taught that we meet our shadow, not only in dreams, but in others' reactions to us. Sometimes the most dangerous sign of transformation is the hostility it awakens around you. When your clarity enters the room, others feel exposed, and they recoil, not because you are wrong, but because you are too accurate. There was a teacher who carried this burden. She never accused, never raised her voice. Yet in meetings her colleagues grew uneasy, stumbling over words, avoiding her eyes. Later she realized it wasn't her behavior but her presence. She saw through the masks they wore, and they could feel it. Her insight was a mirror they did not want to face. What she thought was isolation was actually proof of her perception. The mirror of shadows is both curse and confirmation. To carry it means you will often be misunderstood, even feared. But it also means you are walking with a vision the collective cannot yet bear. So ask yourself with honesty, when others turned from you, was it truly because you were too much, or because you reflected back a truth they could not yet endure? 5. The rhythm of synchronicity. Jung called synchronicity the language of the unconscious, a pattern that binds inner state and outer event. When timing seems uncanny, when coincidences pile like secret notes, it is not chance but choreography. The psyche aligns itself with the world, and the world answers back. A man once grieved the end of a long relationship. For weeks he walked in silence, asking the sky for a sign. Then, one morning, a book slipped from a crowded shelf in a used store, opening on a page that spoke the exact words he had whispered the night before. Days later, he met a stranger who repeated a phrase he had dreamt of. He could not explain it, and yet he knew life was conspiring with his pain, urging him forward. Synchronicity does not flatter the ego. It does not give us what we want on demand. It reveals when we are ripe for change, whether or not we are ready to admit it. It is the rhythm beneath apparent chaos, a reminder that your suffering has always been woven into a larger pattern. So I ask you not to answer lightly, but as if listening for your own coordinates. What signs has life placed along your path? The dream, the phrase, the encounter, and did you recognize them as accidents or as the rhythm of something larger moving through you? The collapse that freed her. She was 36, a lawyer who had spent a decade climbing toward partnership. Every hour was scheduled, 12-hour workdays, late-night emails, weekends blurred into conferences. Stability looked perfect, until the day the firm folded without warning. Overnight, the title, the salary, the prestige dissolved. She lay awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, convinced she had been erased. But weeks later, as the panic softened, she found herself painting again, something she had abandoned since childhood. What began as small sketches on her kitchen table became canvases, then exhibitions. She later admitted, if the collapse had not arrived, she would have died behind her desk. The wound had been disguised as ruin, but it was the doorway into her real life. The dream that warned him. He was engaged to be married. Everyone around him celebrated, the perfect couple, the perfect story. But in the weeks before the wedding, his nights became haunted. He dreamt of an empty house with shattered windows. He woke each morning with his chest tight, his body unsettled. He told no one. 2 months after the wedding, secrets surfaced. Infidelity that had begun long before vows were exchanged. The marriage collapsed, but the dreams had already spoken. He realized his unconscious had been screaming in symbols long before his conscious mind could bear the truth. Looking back, he said, "My body mourned before my mind would admit it." The stranger in the station, she had just buried her father. Her body felt heavy, her soul silent. She walked through a train station at dusk, numb to the world. A book slipped from a stranger's bag and landed at her feet. When she bent to return it, she noticed the title, The Art of Grief. The stranger smiled softly and said, "It helped me once. Maybe it's for you." It was. Every page mirrored her own pain. Every chapter carried words she could not yet form. That chance encounter, that synchronicity, became the thread she followed out of despair. She later said, It was not a stranger, it was timing. These stories are not ornaments. They are living proof of the 5 signs: wounds as doorways, the body as oracle, disruption as design, shadows as mirrors, and synchronicity as rhythm. Each life shows what Jung insisted, that suffering does not strike at random. It strikes with purpose, arriving at the exact moment when the false self can no longer hold. Carl Jung argued that suffering is never arbitrary. He called the psyche teleological, driven by an end, an unseen purpose. What feels like collapse is often the psyche moving you toward wholeness. The self, he insisted, is not interested in your comfort. It is interested in your becoming. That is why it wounds with precision. Nietzsche, writing from another angle, declared, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." Chaos, in his vision, is not an error, but a requirement. The storms you resist are the very crucibles that form brilliance. Where most see breakdown, Nietzsche saw gestation. He warned, if you avoid chaos, you avoid creation. Freud, less poetic but equally sharp, insisted on a darker truth. Awareness alone does not transform. The unconscious repeats until you disrupt it with action. If you collapse after betrayal but never confront your pattern of surrender, you will find yourself betrayed again. The psyche is merciless in this way. It delivers the same wound until you learn to choose differently. Together, these voices create a dangerous but liberating picture. Jung says your wound is purposeful. Nietzsche says your chaos is creative. Freud says your repetition is inevitable until you act. This trinity of thought reframes collapse not as failure but as necessity. It tells us that despair is not an interruption of life. It is life's most exacting teacher. Consider what this means. The pain that humiliated you was not meant to destroy you, but to dismantle the self you had mistaken for permanent. The shame you carried was not evidence of defect, but proof you had encountered the limit of an old identity. The crisis was not a punishment, but an alchemy, the dissolving of lead so that gold might emerge. And yet philosophy is useless unless lived. Jung never wrote these truths as abstract speculation. He lived them in his confrontation with the unconscious, when visions nearly drove him mad, when he drew, painted, and wrote his red book to survive the torrent. Nietzsche lived them in his exile, his descent into illness, where solitude became his crucible. Freud lived them in the consulting room, watching patterns destroy his patients until they dared to act differently. Their lesson is not that suffering is glamorous. It is that suffering is intelligent. It is the psyche's way of dragging you toward truth. So the next time collapse arrives, the question is not, why is this happening to me? But what is this trying to create through me? That shift from victim to collaborator with mystery is the beginning of individuation. Jung warned that awareness alone changes nothing. To live differently, you must practice differently. Collapse becomes initiation only if you step into it with new gestures, new choices. Here are 5 practices that turn suffering into transformation. Change the question. When collapse arrives, your first impulse is to ask, why now? Why me? This question chains you to victimhood. Instead, practice asking, what now? Not why, but what? Not explanation, but creation. Each time you shift the question, you step out of paralysis and into dialogue with your deeper self. Record the signs. The unconscious speaks through symbols, dreams, synchronicities. Most dismiss them as noise. Begin to write them down. The dream that unsettled you, the number that repeats, the stranger's phrase that pierced you. This act of recording is not superstition, it is fidelity. It tells your psyche, I am listening. And the more you listen, the clearer the language becomes. Practice a small death. The ego clings to roles, habits, possessions, even when they are lifeless. Once a week, choose a small death. Decline an invitation that drains you. Delete an object that no longer carries meaning. Sit in silence instead of filling the air with words. These micro-deaths teach the ego that endings are survivable. They prepare you for larger transformations without terror. Turn chaos into symbol. When feelings surge like floods, don't rush to silence them. Give them shape. Draw the image. Write the dream. Move your body to the rhythm of the storm. Symbol transforms weight into meaning. Jung himself survived his darkest years by painting his visions into the Red Book. What could have destroyed him became the foundation of depth psychology. Your chaos can become map if you dare to give it form. Step back from the savior role. Many suffer because they carry burdens that are not theirs. Partners' despair, friends' failures, families' shadows. Jung warned that when you live as the savior, you rob others of their confrontation with their own growth. The practice is this. When you feel the pull to rescue, pause. Ask, is this mine to carry? If not, release it. Witness without absorbing. Love without erasure. Each time you do, your own center strengthens. These practices are not decorations. They are disciplines. They shift collapse from punishment into passage. They teach you to participate in the timing of your life rather than fight it. And with repetition, they create a new posture, one that does not crumble at every storm, but stands rooted, steady, open. Jung taught that the goal of analysis is not to erase suffering, but to find meaning within it. He called this the process of individuation, the slow, courageous work of becoming whole. It is not about eliminating the shadow, but about integrating it. Not about silencing pain, but about listening until it reveals its hidden shape. Look back at your own story, the wounds that nearly erased you, the betrayals that silenced you, the endings that felt unbearable. Were they punishments, or were they thresholds? The exact moments your false self dissolved so that something deeper could breathe. This is the paradox. What you thought would destroy you was in fact the beginning. Your darkest night was not abandonment, it was precision. Your collapse was not random, it was choreography. And so the invitation is this. Write in the comments a single sentence that begins with "From today, I trust." Finish it with your truth. From today, I trust my body. From today, I trust the self within me. From today, I trust the timing of my soul. Your words may become the mirror someone else needs tonight. And if you want me to go deeper into these mysteries, to explore the shadow, the archetypes, the symbols that guide transformation, tell me simply, yes, I want more, because the next step is waiting, and your voice will decide if the door opens. This is not for us all, but for those who recognize themselves here. You already know, your pain was not wasted. It was sacred. It was the language of a deeper self calling you home. So if this journey touched you, share it, subscribe, carry it further. Not as clicks, not as routine, but as an act of resonance. Each time one of us chooses meaning over collapse, the collective heals a little more. We'll meet again in the next video, where another hidden truth will surface. Another fragment of shadow will turn into light. Until then, may you walk gently with yourself.